Well, here we are in the 747-400 at Sydney Airport, and we're going to be taking it down to Wollongong because we can, and we're trying to recreate what might roughly be the view from the upcoming Qantas delivery flight that is giving HARS the first ever 747-400 that Qantas had delivered back whenever, the one that set the 20-hour world record endurance passenger flight, a record that apparently still holds. So now that we've got a bit of flap set, nose up set properly, we'll get underway. We've taken all the passengers out, and we've only got a crew of 4, and we're running on about 20% of a fuel load. So the aircraft should be nimble as whatever. So we'll keep the engine thrust right down, under 90%. As soon as we get airborne, we'll have to probably cut it back to, I don't know, normal cruise while we climb, I suppose. Haven't really worked it out, but we'll keep the speed around the 220 knots, and we won't go above 5,000 feet. We'll probably try and stick around the 4,500 feet as we go. So, positive rate of climb, gear up, and we can knock the... We're over 200 knots now, so we can knock the flaps back to 1 notch while we climb out. There's the 16 left runway. We took off from 16 right, and the suburbs of Sydney to the left and to the right over there, and down to just to the right of our track is Wollongong, and we do have the couple of waypoints set in the GPS. Here we go, having to throttle back already while we're still climbing at a couple of 3,000 feet a minute or whatever. Anyway, that'll all settle down. We're flying this flight entirely manually. In other words, no autopilot whatsoever. Why? Because we can, and it's more fun that way. Rightio, so we're showing that we're a little bit left of the entered GPS track, so we'll just make a very gentle correction to join that track, and we'll head on for the first waypoint. And now that we're at around about the 4,500 feet, it looks like we'll just settle down, and to avoid a longer video than is necessary, I've just increased the speed of the video to 2.5 times as we track on to the next waypoint, holding around about the 4,700 and trying to remain around about the 220 knots. Flaps are all up. So as we head on down towards Wollongong Airport, we know that there will be thousands of people crowding around all the vantage points on the coast, or cliffs which are visible over there on the right, and the all the rest of Wollongong and Dapto and all the approaches to the airport. People will be aghast and in awe of our incredible journey, but we won't let that affect our humble belief that we are no better than any other flight sim pilot who decides to take a 747-400 from YSSY Kingsford Smith International down to YWOL Wollongong, which is not actually designed for such large aircraft. However, the light weight of this ferry flight with a very minimal fuel load means that we can probably expect to be able to remain comfortably in the air as low as 130 knots. We'll try and hold around about 140 to 150 knots on approach. But anyway, at the moment we're still doing the 220 knots trying to hold close to 220 knots and around about the bit over 4,500 feet. Try not to go up over 5,000, but hand flying this big beastie, all you got to do is look around or allow your attention to waver for a minute, and you'll find that it's gone back up to 1,000 foot a minute climb, or descended in 1,000 foot a minute descent. So you've got to ease the control one way or the other, and then ease the thrust so that the 220 odd knots is maintained. And meanwhile, the co-pilot's sitting there reading some comic or something and has taking no part in this, because he's got the poos because he wanted to fly it himself. And I said, no, I'm going to fly this one, and oh god, it never ends, does it? Anyway, enough of that. Very shortly we shall be getting down to the 2,500 foot mark. We've started our descent, and we'll resume normal speed. And there's Wollongong ahead to the left, and Dapto and whatever to straight ahead. I'm not too sure on Wollongong geography. All I know is that on the southwestern corner of that sort of lake thing, I don't know what you'd call it, an inlet, a lake, is Wollongong Airport with a 1634 runway. We will be landing on runway 16, and now we need to start thinking about our approach. And as the aircraft slows around about 200 knots, we'll knock a little bit more flap in and try and enter over Newcastle at around about a bit over 2,000 feet, maybe 2,500. I can't really see because unfortunately the live sound recording didn't work on the video capture, so I'm playing this back on my video editing program, and all I get is a little preview screen, which makes it impossible to read the altitude. But as far as I remember, we were somewhere around about the 2,500 feet, descending for 2,000 at this point, and airspeed we'd allowed to decay to maybe 190, a bit under 200, and flap had been selected at about 3 or 4 notches, and we're approaching slowly the turn to put us on the runway heading. Aircraft's nice and stable. I think it's probably around about 180 knots at this stage, and slowly losing height under 2,000 feet, maybe 1,700 at this stage. As soon as I get a visual on the runway, I'll be able to assess whether or not we're too high or too low. Another notch of flap there. Maybe try and bring the speed down to maybe 170. And maybe a bit over 1,500 feet at this stage. I can't remember, but that's what I reckon I'd be at this stage. Nice gentle turn to bring us onto the runway heading gently, rather than trying to do any last minute, rate 1 turn to bring us straight on. That's for aircraft computers to do that. When you're hand flying, you want to turn early, turn gently, and just try and pick up the centre line visually at around about I don't know, what's that, 5 mile out, maybe a bit more. So not sure what our altitude at the moment is, but I'd be surprised if it's over 1,500 feet at this stage. I suspect the speed had already dropped to 160 or 150. Gear is down. Gear was down just before we made this final turn. Still got a little bit more to go to the right to enter the find the runway heading. The centre line, and somebody was making a radio call saying they were in the circuit. Well, that's why I had to make a bloody call, because the airspace is supposed to be closed for our arrival, so I don't know who's up there flying around. It certainly wasn't authorised, and they might get a big slap on the wristy. Okay, so that approach looks pretty damn good at this stage. Speed's probably down to about 140, 148, somewhere in that range, and height's probably about 700, coming down nicely, 1,000 feet a minute, which is okay at this stage, and we expect to have a good landing because the shape of the runway looks good, airspeed's good, rate of descent's good, flaps are out. Maybe we're a little bit slow at this stage, yes. 130 to 140 knots, we should be a bit over 140, so power's on to try and recover that.
200.
Without shooting up in the air. Okay, now we're committed, and I'll let the call-outs tell you what's happening.
Minimum 50, 40, 30, 20.
Almost a stall buffet there, just before we landed. Anyway, reasonably gentle, not a kisser,
10.
But we had to get it on the ground nice and quickly. Reverse thrust, apply a little bit of brake, and she pulls up quick as you like with that very low payload. And we'll go and park it in front of the Connie hangar, and two magnificent birds in the sky will be reunited. Now I have no idea where the concrete patch that this thing's supposed to, newly made concrete patch that this thing's supposed to sit on, is located, but I imagine they'll be towing it there, so all we have to do is get over there in front of the hangar where thousands of people are, invisible people. We know they're there, press, TV, you name it, giving us a hero's welcome. You know, you can imagine they're there, and there we go, flight completed.
$500. 400. 300. 200. 100. Minimums 50, 40, 30, 20. 10.